Welcome to Stories Between Us, a podcast of short, fictional stories about the lives, tension, and intimacy between queer men. These episodes are for mature audiences and may include explicit themes. Told through AI voice narration, each episode drops you into a moment, a glance, a decision, a connection that lingers. Stories that feel real, sometimes sexy, sometimes messy, and always rooted in what's felt, even when it's never said. Two men planned a quiet winery date, horseback riding, fresh air, something different. Neither of them says it out loud, but both know this is more than just a regular date. One man is ready for love, and the other's still figuring out if he can handle love at all. He hadn't been on a date like this before. Not with a man, not in public, not out where the air was this quiet and white folks nodded like they had nothing to prove. The winery sat high on a hill, lined with rows of green vines and crushed gravel paths that crunched beneath the horses' hooves. It smelled like money and lavender and distance from real life. He kept his eyes on the man riding in front of him. Tight denim, clean white tee, boots that looked too new to be this dusty. He sat up straight in the saddle like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. Or maybe he just knew how to fake it. He looked back once, held his gaze a second longer than necessary, then smirked. The instructor had gone further ahead, creating some distance between them. His own posture was stiff, hands tight on the reins, legs awkward around the horse's body. But he kept riding, watching the way the other man moved. Like this was regular for him. Like black men went on winery dates all the time. They slowed as they reached the top of a small ridge. The instructor disappeared down another path. Just the two of them again. The first man dismounted smoothly. Boots landed on the grass. He turned and waited. He got down slower. One foot, then the other. The horse shifted under him, but he caught himself. He straightened his jacket, then looked up. The other man was already stepping forward. "Give me those," he said, reaching for the reins. He handed them over without a word, watching as the man tied both horses to a post like it was nothing. Then he turned around and stared at him. They stood closer. Not touching, but close enough for it to feel like a movie. The man reached up and adjusted his collar, but he didn't move his hand right away. Instead, he pressed his palm flat against his chest, then slid it up to his neck. The kiss was cautious, but intentional. One hand gripped the back of his neck. The other hand landed on his waist. He kissed him back, matching his energy. When the kiss ended, they pulled apart. Neither of them moved. Their hands stayed where they were. One of them looked down. The other didn't. "Sit with me over here," the man said, already walking toward the bench near the overlook. They sat together, legs touching. One of them reached into his jacket and pulled out a small plastic bottle, the kind that didn't come with a tasting menu. "You did not bring corner store liquor to a winery," the other said, laughing as he leaned away. "Just in case," he shrugged. He twisted the top and took a swig, then handed it over. The other man looked at it, smirked, then took a sip like it was nothing. The horses shifted behind them, tied and silent. The sun had moved lower, casting long shadows over the hills. He didn't look at the view. He looked at the man beside him. His face relaxed. His hand moved again, to his thigh this time. He didn't move it. Didn't say anything. That was the moment they realized this was different. Not the kiss, not the corner store liquor, that hand, the weight of it, the decision to leave it there. That's what made this a real date. Part 2 picks up right where they left off, climbing back onto the horses. The sun dipping lower now. The winery grounds quieter than before. Neither of them said much on the ride back. By the time they returned to the stables, the instructor was gone. One of them held the reins. The other brushed dirt from his jeans. They didn't look at each other right away. It felt like the kind of silence where you either say too much or nothing at all. Back at the room, the door closed behind them with a soft click. One dropped his boots by the wall. The other sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting on his thighs. He finally spoke. I know what this feels like to me, but I need to know what it is to you. The man by the door exhaled and looked down. It's real. That's the part that scares me, because I don't do real. I do fun nights. I do goodbyes that don't require follow-up. This is something I might want to keep. The man on the bed nodded once. Then say that. Don't make me guess. He crossed the room and sat beside him. Their knees touched. He didn't say anything at first. Just reached out, placed his hand behind the other man's neck and pulled him in. Not for a kiss, just to rest their foreheads together. I want to be ready. For you. For this. But I'm not gonna lie and say I'm not scared. The man pulled back, studied his face. There was no argument, just stillness. One of them stood up, walked to the window, and looked out. The other laid back on the bed, hands folded behind his head. It didn't feel like an ending, just a pause. The kind of pause you take before deciding what story you're going to tell next. Part 3 picks up 1 year later. One man comes back to town after taking a job and moving, but not for long, and not with promises, but enough to remind them both what never really ended. Their legs were tangled in cotton sheets, skin against skin, slow and warm, the kind of heat that didn't come from urgency, but from memory. He was on top, hips rolling steady, lips parted. The man beneath him gripped his waist and pulled him deeper. There was no music, just the sound of the bed moving and breath catching. It was quiet and close, a rhythm that had history in it. When it was over, neither of them moved right away. Sweat on their chests, fingers still laced. It wasn't new, but it felt like it mattered more now. He rolled off to the side, grabbed the towel from the chair, and wiped his face. The other man sat up back against the headboard, watching. You always do that, he said. What? Come back like no time passed. Like we didn't lose a whole year. He didn't answer right away. Just leaned over, grabbed his boxers off the floor and stood up. You want me to apologize? I want you to explain. He pulled the waistband over his hips, turned toward the window. I had to leave. That job came through. I wasn't ready to stay. The man on the bed nodded. Not like he agreed, more like he expected it. And now? Now I'm back. Just for a few weeks. So what are we doing? He looked over his shoulder. You tell me. There was silence between them. The kind that didn't feel empty. Just unfinished. The man on the bed leaned forward. I waited. Not on purpose, but I did. Nobody else got close, not like that. He walked back to the bed, sat down, palmed the man's thigh. You think I didn't want to stay? I was scared I'd mess it up. Scared it was too real. The man looked at him. Then don't mess it up now. You're back. Act like it. He nodded once, then again. Then leaned in and kissed him. Not rushed. Not sorry. Just ready to start over. A few days later, after the last time they touched, they haven't spoken, haven't seen each other, and just silence and the occasional Instagram story view. But now, one late night message changes everything. The DM had just said, "You around?" Nothing else. No emojis, no small talk. He almost didn't answer. But 2 hours later, they were sitting across from each other again. Some bar. They didn't hug, didn't flirt. Just two men sitting at a high-top table, one with a glass of red wine, the other still deciding if he should have come at all. The one who stayed leaned forward first. I'm not trying to pick up where we left off. I'm trying to figure out if we still exist at all. The one who had left town nodded slowly. No defense, no deflection. I still feel the same. I just didn't know how to handle all the responsibility you wanted from me. The wine arrived. He took a sip, then learned. There was a pause, a beat where neither of them said anything. Then the one who left reached into his coat pocket and slid a small folded card across the table. It was a reservation for a winery 2 hours away. This weekend. The man looked at it. Looked at him. So what's this supposed to mean? It means I'm not just saying I'm serious. I'm showing you. A longer pause. Then he smiled. Not big, but real. The scene held there. Not a kiss. Not a promise. Just the decision to try again. And maybe that was the most honest kind of love they could give each other now. Thank you for listening to Stories Between Us, a podcast about queer male connection, tension, and everything that gets felt but not always said. Follow Stories Between Us Anthology on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave a comment and rate the show so more people can find us. Welcome to Stories Between Us, a podcast of short, fictional stories about the lives, tension, and intimacy between queer men. These episodes are for mature audiences and may include explicit themes. Told through AI voice narration, each episode drops you into a moment, a glance, a decision, a connection that lingers. Stories that feel real, sometimes sexy, sometimes messy, and always rooted in what's felt, even when it's never said. The story starts with a phone, a voicemail, and a man realizing he was being missed by someone in his past. He found the voicemail by accident. One tap on the speaker and a voice filled the kitchen, low, familiar, and way too soft. It wasn't angry. It was tender. It said things that hadn't been said in this house for months. He didn't hear betrayal. He heard missing, and that was worse. Good men don't lie. They just stopped telling the truth. The rain started before sunrise. The city was quiet. Just the hum of traffic and the low sound of a voicemail replaying for the third time. Same words, same tone. He turned the volume down, but not off. The voice belonged to the one person who'd introduced them, back when things were easy. When love still felt like a promise instead of a schedule. The message wasn't new, it was weeks old, but it said enough.
Hope you're okay. Miss hearing you laugh. You don't sound happy lately. He pressed pause, but the words kept echoing anyway. Across the room, his partner was still asleep, arms stretched across the sheets. Peaceful in a way that made everything harder.
He looked at him and tried to feel angry. He couldn't. He just felt tired. They hadn't argued. They hadn't cheated. They'd just stopped talking. They stopped reaching for each other. The truth was simpler than the lie. He'd been missing for months, not physically, just emotionally gone. And someone else had noticed first.
When his partner woke up, they moved through the morning like strangers. Coffee, shower, the usual quiet. The phone buzzed once on the counter. Same number. He looked up. Their eyes met. Just that look. Like they both knew what the other already felt.
Later, when the door closed and the condo went still again, he finally deleted the message. Then he whispered it out loud once, just to taste it. Good men don't lie. They just stop telling the truth. Thank you for listening to Stories Between Us, a podcast about queer male connection, tension, and everything that gets felt but not always said. Follow Stories Between Us Anthology on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave a comment and rate the show so more people can find us. Welcome to Stories Between Us, a podcast of short, fictional stories about the lives, tension, and intimacy between queer men. These episodes are for mature audiences and may include explicit themes. Told through AI voice narration, each episode drops you into a moment, a glance, a decision, a connection that lingers. Stories that feel real, sometimes sexy, sometimes messy, and always rooted in what's felt, even when it's never said. This mini story is a love letter to the teachers and counselors who stay late, to the adults who carry everyone else's storms, and to the quiet resilience of Black queer care. It's about the counselor or teacher who becomes a refuge for every queer kid in the building. The one who listens, protects, and reminds them they're safe, even on the days when that weight feels too heavy to hold alone.
The hallway changed once the last school bus pulled away. Noise emptied out, leaving only the sound of air moving through vents and the faint hum of fluorescent lights.
Kyle walked the hallway slowly, the soles of his shoes whispering across waxed tile. His tie hung loose, sleeves rolled. He could taste rain in the air before the first drop touched the roof. His office waited at the far end of the corridor, door half closed like it was also tired. Inside, the space looked smaller than it had that morning. Stacks of student essays, pinned notes, a mug that read, "World's Best Counselor" in fading marker.
Little gifts covered every shelf of his office, proof that the room meant something to the students. A rainbow keychain hung from the filing cabinet handle. A folded thank you card leaned against a jar of pens that read, "Thank you for listening." A drawing of a sun with uneven rays taped to the wall, given by a freshman who hadn't spoken aloud for the first 2 weeks of school. Each object caught the light differently.
Each one carried a face, a story, a small moment of courage that he'd promised to guard. He sank into his desk chair. The essay on top of the pile was from a student who wrote about feeling invisible. He read it again, tracing the sentences with his thumb. The handwriting reminded him of his own at 15. Tight, slanted, scared to take up space. He could still picture that classroom. The back row, the teacher who looked away after hearing a rumor, the way silence felt both safe and like punishment. He remembered walking home that day and deciding that someday no kid would feel that alone if he could help it. That decision had built this room, his career as a school counselor, and also his current exhaustion. Thunder rumbled outside, low and long. The lights flickered once, steadied again. The air smelled like chalk mixed with rain. Kyle leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. The day replayed itself. The student who came out to him in his office had cried with relief. The senior who handed him a letter about finally telling her parents her truth. The shy kid who had just started using a new name. They'd all left lighter after talking to him. He hadn't noticed how much heavier he'd become because of it, though. He stood and crossed to the window. Lightning bolts lit up the parking lot, rows of cars already gone. A single paper swirled down the sidewalk, one of the graduation posters that had slipped free from the wall. It reminded him of this year's last school bell. Joy mixed with endings. The plant on the windowsill leaned toward the glass, leaves trembling from the wind draft. He reached out, pinched off a brown edge, and dropped it into the trash. He turned back to the room. The colors felt too bright. The thank you notes, the mugs, the little gifts. Suddenly, all of them looked heavier than they were.
He loved these reminders, but they were pieces of a promise that never rested. Every note said, "You saved me," but none said, "How are you still standing?" He packed his bag, zipped it halfway, then stopped.
The sound of rain reached through the cracked window, steady, metallic, a rhythm that matched his pulse. He set the bag down again. His hand rested on the doorknob, cool metal against warm skin. For a moment, he just breathed. He thought of the teachers still awake somewhere grading papers, the ones rewriting tomorrow's lessons, the ones who stayed late for a student who needed to talk. He thought about all the quiet heroes who would never make the morning announcements. The thunder grew louder. He opened the door. The hallway stretched ahead, fluorescent light buzzing above, reflections of rain sliding down the glass. Each step echoed. Each echo felt like another year repeating. At the end of the hall, he pushed through the exit and stood under the overhang. Rain fell hard, thick drops hitting concrete, splashing against his shoes. He loosened his tie and watched water trace lines down the steps. He wanted to cry, but didn't. He wanted to rest, but couldn't. Instead, he stepped forward into the downpour. The cold caught his breath. His shirt clung to him, sleeves heavy. He tilted his head back and let the rain hit his face. He didn't release the weight he carried. He just let the storm press against it. Behind him, the building glowed through the glass, steady, pale, waiting for tomorrow. He stood there between thunder and light, drenched, silent, unbroken. The hum of the lights and the hiss of rain folded into one sound. The same hum that had started the day, the same one that would start it again. Thank you for listening to Stories Between Us, a podcast about queer male connection, tension, and everything that gets felt but not always said. Follow Stories Between Us Anthology on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave a comment and rate the show so more people can find us. Welcome to Stories Between Us, a podcast of short, fictional stories about the lives, tension, and intimacy between queer men. These episodes are for mature audiences and may include explicit themes. Told through AI voice narration, each episode drops you into a moment, a glance, a decision, a connection that lingers. Stories that feel real, sometimes sexy, sometimes messy, and always rooted in what's felt, even when it's never said. He wrote a novel so raw, people swore it had to be real. They weren't wrong. The line at the signing table wrapped past the registers, past the exit and down the block. Everyone had the same look, clutching glossy book covers, eyes wide, waiting for the author. The way the love scenes felt too real to be made up. And they were right. The novel wasn't fiction. Not really. It was memories dressed up as creative writing. The story of a man he couldn't stop seeing. A man he was still currently seeing. City after city, hotel after hotel. The past followed him in the form of text messages, voice notes, and late-night hotel room door knocks. The type of passionate lovemaking that felt like an addiction. This current book had made him famous. Every stop on the tour blurred together. Hotel ballrooms, indie bookstores, morning show appearances. He smiled through panels, shook hands at photo ops, thanked readers for falling in love with characters he hadn't invented so much as survived. But it was the nights that undid him. In Chicago, He climbed into a waiting car before his assistant noticed he'd left already. The man was inside the car waiting for him, younger, heavier built, tattoos crawling up his neck now, deeper than before. They greeted each other with a deep kiss. His fingers hooked into the waistband of the rider's slacks before they'd even left the curb. In the hotel room, the air went hot fast. Clothes came off like confessions. The man's lips kissed his chest, his neck, the spot below his ribs he wrote about in his book. The sex was loud in the beginning, then went quiet as they hid their passionate stride. A gasp into a shoulder, a groan into a pillow. The kind of sounds you make when you want to disappear but still want to be touched anyway. The man left before sunrise, his legs shaky, his lips swollen. And still, he showed up to the bookstore that morning. Collar buttoned, throat raw, but his smile was rehearsed. He shook hands with readers who said his book felt too real. The book tour was selling a fantasy, but in the background, he was living the reality. Thank you for listening to Stories Between Us, a podcast about queer male connection, tension, and everything that gets felt but not always said. Follow Stories Between Us Anthology on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave a comment and rate the show so more people can find us.